All right, let's dive straight into today's explainer on what I like to call humanity's ultimate cold case, the Great Pyramid of Giza. For thousands of years, this absolute behemoth of a structure has been looming over the Egyptian desert. It survived earthquakes, it survived wars, heck, it's even survived dynamite. But its very existence is just so baffling, so mind-bending, that for a long time, it's actually driven people to look up at the stars for answers rather than down at the sand. I mean, how do you even begin to comprehend this? How does an ancient civilization build a 147-meter-tall monument with near-perfect precision, completely without modern technology? The statistics here are just staggering. The Great Pyramid stood as the tallest human-made structure in the entire world for nearly 4,000 years. Its base covers an area roughly the size of 7 New York City blocks. And get this, it is almost perfectly level. It never deviates by more than a single inch. Oh, and the four sides? They're aligned to the cardinal directions with near-perfect accuracy, literally thousands of years before the compass was even a thing.
To really wrap our heads around the dizzying scale of this project, let's look at the math. 2.3 million. That is the total number of stone blocks used to assemble this colossal puzzle. It's one of the heaviest human-made objects of all time, meticulously stacked, piece by piece, just to ensure Pharaoh Khufu had a secure, magnificent home for eternity.
And we're not talking about lightweight bricks here. While the standard limestone blocks are massive on their own, the king's chamber was constructed using these gigantic pink granite monoliths. They had to be quarried hundreds of kilometers away in Aswan. Some of these beams have a mass of up to 50 metric tons, and they were fitted together so incredibly tightly you couldn't even slip a razor blade between them. Honestly, it's this exact physical impossibility that fuels some of the wildest theories about how it was actually made. Which, of course, brings us to the famous alien builder myth. You've probably heard it, but here's the thing. Blaming extraterrestrials for the pyramids isn't some ancient mystical belief. It's actually a remarkably modern invention. It really kicked off in the late 19th century, right as sci-fi was taking flight. Garrett P. Serviss wrote this fictional sequel to H.G. Wells where the pyramids were Martian outposts. Then, flash forward to 1968, and Eric von Däniken is selling millions of books claiming ancient astronauts built them. Ultimately, this whole theory just stems from a lazy refusal to believe that an ancient people working without modern machines could be this incredibly capable. But here's where it gets so much better. When we trade that sci-fi speculation for hard evidence, archaeology replaces these fantastical myths with something even more impressive: gritty, brilliant, real-world logistics and worker organization. Because the truth is, Khufu and his genius architect, half-brother Hemi didn't need magic wands or spaceships. The reality of their human organization, their administrative brilliance, and their massive supply chains is way more awe-inspiring than anything you'd read in a science fiction novel. So how did they pull it off? The secret sauce here was something called the corvée system. Essentially, this was a form of national service. Instead of an army of enslaved people, which is how Hollywood always loves to depict it, these were highly organized gangs of everyday workers summoned to labor for the state. And we know this for sure. We have the archaeological evidence. We've found their campsites, we know exactly how they were fed, and we've even excavated the cemeteries where they were buried with honors. Hemi calculated that he needed roughly 25,000 builders to hit his strict 20-year timeline before Khufu passed away. Now, just to put that into perspective, the estimated Egyptian population at the time was only about 1 million people. So a 25,000-person crew, that is a staggering recruitment drive. It required massive, sprawling campsites and just astronomical amounts of food and supplies just to keep the workforce operating day in and day out. Professor Joyce Tildesley really hits the nail on the head here. She says, there are parts of the technology we can't see today. But basically, it was the sheer amount of person power that made it all possible. The secret weapon wasn't laser beams from space, it was sheer, incredibly coordinated person power. And how did they afford to feed everyone? The Nile River. Every year, it flooded and fertilized the land, allowing Egypt to grow massive excess crops. That agricultural wealth kept everyone fed and paid for the standing army that protected, and, let's be real, sometimes plundered, the surrounding region to fund this giant undertaking.
In fact, you could argue that building the pyramid is actually what built the nation of Egypt. To pull off a mega project like this, they literally had to invent a coordinated civil service. They had to develop massive fleets of boats from scratch just to ship all that timber and stone. They had to rapidly advance their medical skills to deal with the inevitable workplace accidents on the plateau. This one construction project forced an absolute quantum leap in their domestic organization.
Which brings us to architectural quantum leaps: ramps, rails, and elevators.
Okay, so now that we understand who built it and how their society was organized, let's talk engineering. How exactly did Hemiunu and his laborers move those massive stones hundreds of meters into the sky? Right now, science has three incredibly fascinating competing theories. The classic one you've probably heard of is an external ramp, but there's a huge problem with that. You can't just build a steep slope and drag rocks up it. Basic biomechanics show us that average workers would literally drop like flies on any incline steeper than 8%. So to maintain that gentle 8% slope all the way to the 147-meter peak, your ramp would have to be over a kilometer long. It would take more material to build the ramp than the pyramid itself, and guess what? Zero evidence of a ramp that size has ever been found.
So enter French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin, who proposed this incredibly elegant solution. He suggests they did use a short external ramp, but only for the bottom 60 meters. Once they got that high, they dismantled the ramp, took those same limestone blocks, and used them to build the rest of the pyramid from the inside out. They'd use a 1 kilometer, 7% incline, zigzagging internal ramp. Houdin even predicted that there would be notches at the corners, roughly 83 meters up, where workers could pivot the blocks using wooden cranes, and sure enough, an unexplained notch was found exactly where he said it would be. Mind-blowing, right?
But wait, what about those 50-ton granite blocks for the king's chamber? Houdin suggests that the pyramid's magnificent, high-ceilinged corridor, the Grand Gallery, wasn't just some decorative hallway, it was actually a highly engineered counterweight system. The stone benches inside served as rails for trolley cars rolling on wooden logs. Workers could load these carts with smaller rocks, drop them down the gallery, and use that gravity to haul the massive 50-ton granite beams up the lower external ramp. It functioned essentially like a giant, ancient, wheelless railroad track. And the scientific discoveries, they literally just keep coming. Just recently, in 2024, researchers using cutting-edge radar satellite imagery and deep soil coring discovered a long-lost branch of the Nile River that used to flow right alongside the Giza Plateau. This is a total game-changer. It proves that instead of dragging blocks for kilometers across the blistering arid desert, the builders actually transported them horizontally by water, dropping them off right at the base of the construction site.
Now, that proof of water access led to an even more radical theory in 2024. The water elevator. A team of hydrologists and mechanical engineers came out and suggested that, for some pyramids at least, the Egyptians might have captured rainfall and floodwater in a giant dam, guided it through underground conduits into an internal central shaft, and basically used hydraulic power to raise the stones. Imagine a floating wooden platform loaded with rocks. By just manipulating a few valves, workers could float heavy stones upward, with drastically less human labor.
However, to be totally fair and impartial here, we have to note that this hydraulic theory is highly debated in the scientific community. Egypt's top archaeologist Zahi Hawass was actually pretty blunt about it, stating the hydraulic theory is just completely wrong. Skeptics are quick to point out that the older pyramid analyzed in the water study is structurally very different from Khufu's Great Pyramid. It uses much lighter stones, and so far absolutely no comparable central water shaft has been found inside the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Let's move on to the final mysteries, science's next big discovery.
Because despite knowing so much about the brilliant administration and the complex supply chains of ancient Egypt, we are still really just scratching the surface. It is wonderfully, frustratingly ironic that the ancient Egyptians were completely obsessive record keepers. I mean, we have their tax records, we have their beautiful love poems, we literally have 4,000-year-old papyrus receipts for donkey feed, yet somehow we don't have a single blueprint for the Great Pyramid. Whether they were lost to time, hidden away, or intentionally destroyed to protect the tomb's secrets, we just don't know. And that lack of blueprints is exactly what keeps the mystery so alive today.
But hey, modern technology is stepping up right where the papyrus left off. In 2017, using cutting-edge particle physics, specifically a technique called muon radiography, scientists detected a massive, mysterious void hidden deep inside the Great Pyramid. It's completely inaccessible. No human being has set foot inside this space for 4,600 years. Now, some structural engineers think, okay, it might just be a gap built to relieve physical stress on the lower chambers.
But others, including some top archaeologists, are wondering, could this void actually be Khufu's true, undiscovered burial chamber? Because the other massive glaring mystery here is that Khufu's mummy and his legendary treasures, they have never been found. And honestly, this is what's truly fascinating to take away from all this. We don't need aliens or magic wands to be awestruck by the pyramids. The real-world logistical mastery of the ancient Egyptians, paired with the cutting-edge science uncovering their secrets today, is a vastly more compelling story than any fiction. So, what will real archaeology uncover next? I guess we'll just have to keep digging.